How can I approach a conversation with my dismissive avoidant boyfriend to prevent repeating the same painful cycle? He recently returned after a 6-week break and initially showed warmth and connection, but I'm struggling to trust him. He often responds to feeling criticized by blaming me or shutting down, hanging up, taking space, and so on. While I've expressed how projecting his frustrations onto me impacts our relationship, he still reacts quickly with defensiveness. I'm working on my own boundaries and don't want our relationship to revolve around appeasing him anymore. How can I address my concerns about trust and boundaries clearly? And how can we build a healthier communication moving forward? Great question. So across the board, you want to approach avoidant partners with what are called soft strategies in communication. So this means that you're approaching them gently and you avoid evaluative language, meaning you're not blamey in the way that you approach them. And you want to focus instead on expressing your feelings honestly with specific emotional language. So you're going to also avoid any language that sounds critical or like you're analyzing them or interpreting them, because that can trigger defensiveness. Okay. So you said, I tell him, he shuts down, hangs up, takes space whenever I tell him I don't like him projecting things onto me. So when you say you're projecting things onto me, automatically you're analyzing him. You're coming to a conclusion about what they are doing. And you're saying you're analyzing me and I don't like it. But that leaves us completely separate from how you're feeling. So he doesn't actually experience the consequences of what he's doing, because you've just removed yourself from the equation. You've jumped into your head because you're probably feeling wounded. And so to prevent him from taking advantage of your woundedness, or to protect yourself from your own woundedness, you say, you're doing this and I don't like it. But now we've completely moved away from your hurt. And he has no access to the consequences of his behavior, which is your hurt, right? So what do? Well, we move away from evaluations. I don't know what he's projecting, but let's say he says something like, you expect so much from me. You might say something like, ouch, that really hit me in the gut. Because when I think about it, the things I expect are A, B, C. I expect you to respond within 24 hours. I expect you to care about my feelings when I express them. I expect you to be responsive in a conversation. And those are things that I expect from relationship in general. And those are things that allow me to feel connected. And when you say something like that to me, I feel like unseen. I feel lonely. I feel like a punch to the gut. So can you respond to what it is that I do expect, instead of this idea of what you think you're being obligated to? Because this is where, if someone's projecting onto you, you have to do reality testing. And you offer reality testing by being honest about how you really feel, not about what they are doing, right? So soft strategies. The other thing about soft strategies is they typically express appreciation for a partner's autonomy while offering choices. And they also express curiosity about the other person's experience without making some kind of assumption, right? So here are a few ways you can approach avoidant partners, just a couple of tips that utilize soft strategies in communication. So for example, firstly, you want to make sure that you are focusing on the present moment. This can include things like avoiding confrontational questions, again, that look to assign blame or point out mistakes from the past or interpret their behavior from an intellectualized place. Instead, you might say something like, well, I can tell you're upset. And well, this is something that people might say. I can tell you're upset and it's probably connected to your childhood issues. I understand that, but I wish you'd just talk about your feelings so that I can know how to help you better, or I can know how to help you feel better, right? So I would not use this language. Instead, I would focus on the present moment and what you're observing and how you're feeling response to it. So I just noticed that you crossed your arms and looked away. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Maybe I can help, right? No assumptions. You're just observing the behavior without evaluation. You're expressing your curiosity and you're offering support. Maybe I can help. I don't know that I can. I need you to tell me, right? I'm not making assumptions about you. And it also avoids getting too wordy And it also helps them not feel so overwhelmed by the weight of the past. Maybe it is something from the past that's affecting them in the moment. But if you address it in the present moment, then it becomes more accessible as opposed to adding all this historical context to it or evaluations to it, right? You're also not assuming responsibility for fixing their problems. And because sometimes when we try to do that or offer it without solicitation, it can feel invasive or like we're trying to manage their feelings for them. And that feels like we're encroaching on their personal autonomy and freedom. Another example is make sure that we're demonstrating that we are listening actively. And this can be challenging, I think, for anxious partners because they are so perceptive and they usually do pick up on things that are nonverbal or unspoken. The problem is they can sometimes jump to a conclusion that may not be completely accurate. Okay. So what it means to be an active listener means that you're paying close attention to what your partner's saying, of course, that you validate their feelings and that you're responding accordingly. So we're listening to understand, we're not listening to respond, right? And we're not listening for an action step, so to speak, at least not just yet. So for example, you might say, wow, I can only imagine what you're feeling right now. What do you suppose your options are? Right? We're not assuming what they're feeling. We are trying to imagine it, and that demonstrates care. We're also inquiring about their own assessment of the situation, and that helps them to feel empowered and as if you trust them and you respect their judgment about it, even if you don't agree with it. Then you also want to focus on empathy versus sympathy. Sympathy really involves feeling sorry for someone, which can kind of come across as condescending or patronizing. On the other hand, when we express real empathy, genuine empathy, this is about understanding someone's feelings from within their point of view, and not feeling sorry for them or trying to fix it for them because you acknowledge the power and the authority they have in that situation, even if they feel helpless. You acknowledge the agency that they do have. So sympathy might sound like, I'm sorry you're having a hard time, let me help you. And of course, depending on the intonation of that, it could come across as patronizing, right? Or that you don't think someone can handle the situation, which to an avoidant partner feels like you're questioning their agency. Also, depending on how sensitive they are, they might think you're trying to ingratiate yourself to their vulnerable side, which throws up their defenses. It's probably more common with a fearful avoidant partner. So in contrast, an empathic statement might sound like, oof, man, that'd be tough on anyone. If you need something, I'm here. So we're keeping it short and sweet. We're normalizing the difficulty that they might be experiencing by extrapolating it to it's normal for anyone, right? We're also assuming that they know how to handle the situation by trusting their own assessment of choosing to tell you what they want or choosing to tell you what they might need. The other thing you can do in this situation is give them options. Sometimes they may not know what they need, or they may not know what they want. In this case, you can give them options like, hey, well, if you're not sure what you need or want, these are things that help me out, right? So going to a movie and watching something dumb for an hour, just sitting together in silence and being present in the moment. Right? Let's go punch some pillows and howl at the moon. Do you want me to just leave you alone and check in with you like tomorrow? Sometimes offering options can be helpful. It just depends on what you know about your partner, right? They might appreciate that. Some might say that you're trying to fix it for them or control them by offering options. Again, options is optional. I would say that would be tough for anyone. Let me know if you need or want anything because I'd love to be there for you. And then options, if you feel like they would receive that well. Then, of course, just to be understanding. So it can be hard to be understanding when we don't really get it, and when we would not respond that way. And that's especially true if we have different ways of expressing ourselves. So assuming an attitude of understanding can take a little bit of practice. Instead of saying something like, man, I'm so frustrated that you don't understand what I'm saying, we might say, well, I'm feeling frustrated right now, but I want to understand. So can you tell me what you don't like about this and how I might say it better so that it lands better with you or so that you can hear it in a different way? And that can kind of, again, expressing curiosity, that can kind of open up the conversation in a different way. And then, of course, we need to have boundaries, right? Boundaries is so fundamental and foundational to everything. We just want to make sure that when we're expressing our boundaries, that we're not being vague. Sometimes people say vague things and it leads to confusion, which leads to triggered arguments because it can come across as demanding, especially if we're not being clear. So for example, someone might say, I need space. That's way too vague. What do you mean by space? What does that mean? The other side of that would be, I need to talk. I need to connect. I need more time. I need more intimacy. All of those things, vague. What is intimate to you? What creates a feeling of connection, right? What's more time? I feel like we're spending a lot of time together. What are you talking about? So this is where we get really clear on our boundaries. And for those of you that have either the Courageous Communicator program already, or you have the 101 courses, there are modules in both of those courses that talk about boundaries and how to formulate them using a 5-step process, right? But just for example, I know it can be tough talking about emotions, but if we could find a time to talk about it, maybe just for 10 or 15 minutes tomorrow evening, that would help me feel connected to you and less alone in this. Or you could even say, I know it's tough to talk about emotions, but if you could give me a check-in tomorrow evening, even if it's just for 5 minutes, to tell me that you need more time to process, that would help me be patient and still feel connected to you in this process. So you're just kind of outlining the expectations for the conversation. You're giving a time frame. There's a container. I find that even anxious folks can give their partners a lot of leeway as long as they have some sense of the container for the time and space that their partners are giving them, and also that there's a specific date and time that they'll check in, even if it's to ask for more space. And that's not a lot to ask for, incidentally. And if a partner's not willing to meet you on that level, that's good information for you, right? So those are just some examples of how we might apply soft strategies in communication with avoidant partners. And just give me a comment there in the chat. Is this helpful? Have you found yourself having conversations like this? Is this making sense? I'd love to know where you guys are at with this. So however this person reacts to the establishment of your boundaries and the use of soft strategies in communication is really important information for you. If they respond positively, well, then maybe there's a chance here. If they continue to respond defensively, to withdrawal, to sort of increase the negative behaviors and responses, also really important information for you, because now you know what's possible with them. And that's all the information you need to make the decisions that you must. Right? That's the thing that I just want to emphasize that we need to remember and acknowledge about communication is that, sometimes I give people these strategies and they'll say, well, it doesn't work. What do you mean? What do you mean? Whenever I get that, I say you have to evaluate your intentions and your goals. Why are you learning improved communication? Not to get them to be, do, say what you want them to be so you can finally be happy. No, you're learning these skills so that you can become increasingly aware of your boundaries, so that you can become increasingly aware of what is your emotional and personal responsibility to yourself and to the relationship. And also to become an investigator of the truth, not a magician, not a strategist to try to manipulate them into doing what you want. You are showing up with a knowledge of what strategies work best, taking into consideration their triggers and their perspective as well as your own, and showing up with a compassionate spirit of generosity and a willingness to an allowance for them to make mistakes and correct, just as you would want them to allow you to make mistakes and to course correct, right? To show them, to give them an opportunity to demonstrate that to you and to show that to them as well. But once you've done all that and you show up, and they increase the volume on their defensiveness or their insecurities, then here you are, the investigator of the truth, and the truth has revealed itself. Now this is what's possible with them. And a lot of people say, oh, well, it doesn't work, or, but what if they do this, or what if they do that? Yeah, what if? What does that tell you? So these skills are working. They're working quite well in those circumstances because it's forcing you to face the truth of what's going on here. And the part that's worried about the not working, that's the attachment anxiety. That's the inner child that's still attached, but it needs to listen to the adult version of you that makes good choices for them, right? That's the part that you want in charge, okay? The part that's not afraid of loss, the part that's not afraid of grief, the part that says, you know what? I'm responsible for it up to this point, and beyond that point, it's up to them. And I can't take away their power by enabling them. I'm robbing them of their opportunities to grow if I do that. And in fact, even if I walk away from them, I may become the catalyst that they need and require to step into their highest version. And I'm robbing them of that by robbing myself of this opportunity, by clinging when I should be letting it go, by holding firm in my boundaries instead of appeasing them. Okay. So let's keep in mind our intentions and our goals for communication. It's really important, right? Also, remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week, and I wouldn't want you to miss out.